Ahoy there, mateys! It looks like we somehow arrived at this unexpected island that is filled to the brim with Goombas, and is especially noticeable it has a lot of islands to explore around, and on top of that, unexpectedly, there's a volcano back there. It's almost like a shape like a Goomba. But anyways, greetings ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Maxi here, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Super Mario Party Jamboree, not only for the Nintendo Switch 1, but recently for the Nintendo Switch 2 version as well, with new content. So anyway, previously we somehow were able to actually experiencing the second board in Super Mario Party Jamboree, which is of course Roll and Raceway, and overall we somehow claimed the ultimate victory at the end because, relatively speaking though, between me and Bodo especially, despite the fact I did select Luigi on the previous board, so no matter what though, it's about the fact that that was awfully close at the very end of that particular board, because generally speaking that was about the fact that, like I said earlier, between me and Bodo are basically neck to neck in regards to the forms that gain the most stars at the end, as well as most coins at the end, but regardless of such though, I still managed to able to classify as my ultimate victory, thanks to the forms of those recognizable 2 bonus stars, which is of course minigame bonus and rich bonus. So the classic 2 of one of those bonus stars we somehow got, and meanwhile when it comes to the forms of Spike though, he was the only one who did manage to able to got the Bowser Space bonus. So I digress. So when it comes to the forms of this weekend, and potentially maybe Monday for next week as well, that obviously though, if you couldn't tell, we're going to be diving into the third board in Super Mario Party Jamboree, which is called Goomba Lagoon. Now, out of all the actual boards in the entire game, Goomba Lagoon is, sadly though, is perhaps one of my least favorite boards in the game. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad looking board. Like, I do like the tropical beach setting, just like the forms of how it does it in Yoshi's Tropical Island. But here's the catch to this though, is about the fact that this board does have a lot of gimmicks to it. So as a result, yeah, we'll get to that point, because as you can tell, speaking of Goomba, I'm actually going to be using Goomba for this board, because obviously though, the last time we actually see Goomba in action was actually at the very first board in the game, despite the fact that it's being controlled by a computer player. So at this time, I'm not going to be taking control of the Goomba on the Goomba-themed board. So, makes sense for this context either way. And as far as computer players this time around though, I also did somehow selected not only Monty Mole, but as well as Strike Guy and Boo. Because it will be pretty interesting if Boo managed to able to encounter himself whenever he decides to able to go for a Boo stealing mechanic. So anyway, so now it's my turn. So as you can see, this place is filled to the brim with a lot of islands that we can able to go into. And the main premise of the forms of this board's gimmick, if you couldn't tell, that as you can tell, this particular board does manage to able to introduce into ourselves. Well, first of all, before we get into more details about this though, we actually got ourselves 2 Boo spots, by the way, like as you can clearly tell. So either way, in terms of event spaces, as you can definitely tell, this board actually has plentiful of these event spaces. So for instance though, the first 2 event spaces, what that does is that one of them will actually force you to able to go onto the zip line, which means about the fact that you have to go onto the other side of the island, and then the other one you have to do with a fishing event. And on top of that, there's also other event spaces where, basically though, this is what the main gimmick of this board decides to come into play. That's what appears to be not only the tide system, but in addition to that though, every once in a while there's actually a Goomba-shaped volcano, which means about the fact that if you do come across into that, you will come across into 3 possibilities, which appears to be, not only it will actually interrupt the volcano, which actually caused not only golden Goombas decide to show up, but in addition to that, Plutterboos or lava bubbles will show up, and even sometimes nothing. So because of that though, it's going to be more accurately, it's like a 33.3% chances for those particular events will happen. So I suppose we'll show you guys more about it if someone or myself were able to come across into that volcano eruption. So anyway, so let's go back into cage match, except now I'm going to be doing some bit of swimming. So because of that, hopefully this particular minigame should be a lot easier with the solo player, because obviously though, if you tap the button as fast as you can, then you should be able to try to avoid that particular incoming cage drop. So either way, it's pretty weird about the fact that Goomba did somehow manage to able to swim with his feet, which is pretty bizarre. Well, because of that though, it's about the fact that then again though, this is technically the second time that Goomba was actually a playable character in a Mario Party game after, you know, Super Mario Party in 2018. So as a result though, it is also very weird too, is about the fact that every once in a while now is about the fact that, you know, Goomba is now a playable character in Mario Kart World. So, yeah, pretty bizarre indeed, especially noticeable that he was obviously already been playable in one of those two Mario Baseball games in the past, in Mario Superstar Baseball and Mario Super Sluggers. So, you get the idea for that point. So, anyway. So yeah, a few things I want to talk about this is though, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date of course there is the 26th of July today, in some cases in 2025 today, so logically though, only 6 more days to go until we're about to be approaching onto the 8th month, in terms of the forms of 2025, and that's of course August. So because of that though, yeah, I'm still incredibly excited in regards to the forms of August coming up. Specifically though, just trying to able to actually experience the new story expansion for the sake of the forms of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And as a result of that matter though, is about the fact I'm still very curious to know of who's responsible for the actual, a bunch of crystals crashing down during the forms within some levels in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. But we'll hear more about that for probably until next month, or potentially speaking of if there's going to be a potential Nintendo Direct for July. At least I keep on hearing about that, but we shall wait and see what happens. And if it doesn't though, we got to wait for a long while, just like the forms of how it does it on remember back in 5 years ago that we have to go through a bunch of those Ponder Showcase Directs, which I'm honestly not a big fan of back then, and so much to the point that still, I can't even believe it's been 5 years ago since when Nintendo Directs firstly introduced a new types of Nintendo Directs, which appears to be, of course, Ponder Showcases, and you know how I feel about it, especially after the events of, you know, like 5 years straight. And as a result though, I found this a little bit bizarre that when it comes to even numbered years, they always attempt to bring up Ponder Showcases sometimes, whilst unlike odd number years, they've never actually brought up any of those Ponder Showcases at all, which I was like, okay, that's very bizarre indeed. So either way, the next thing I want to point out actually, and that's what appears to be for the fact that I'm afraid to tell you that Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to be delayed. I would say this is going to be the final time to able to delay the film, but this time around though it's going to be by a few weeks, and suffice to say, that film is now going to be expected to be releasing until by the end of June in 2027, to be more specifically, June 25th in 2027, so I might be fine with that, especially concerning for the fact that it is a bit of a pain that we have to wait for a ridiculously long while until the actual film finally comes out after that particular initial delay, thanks to the forms of not only the actor's strike, but in addition to the writer's strike ever since in 2023. So because of that though, yeah, it's a bit of a nuisance able to wait for the ridiculous amount of time, but either way. So here's the main gimmick about this board, is that I believe every single 2 turns, sometimes though the tides will able to actually come in, but until the next 2 turns, the tides will go away. I think it's actually kind of similar to the forms of how it does it for the day and night system, for the sake of the forms of Horrorland, not only for Mario Party 2, but in addition to Mario Party Superstars as well. So logically though, it's about the fact that yeah, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on island hopping, similar to the forms of how it does it on some other boards in Mario Party's past, ranging from Wario's Battle Canyon, and in addition to Mystery Land, and there's also, I would say, Goomba's Greedy Gala from Mario Party 4, and on top of that, same applies with the forms of Rainbow Dream and Future Dream in Mario Party 5, and that's as far as I was trying to able to describe about it. So in order to able to get from one island to the other, you have no choice but to either get the pipe, as what Boo did somehow got, and in addition to that, you also have no choice but to able to hop onto one of those event spaces that is actually near to where the zipline is. So because of that though, yeah, this board is, like I said before, is incredibly annoying to get through sometimes. But thankfully though, as soon as we're able to get into the single player mode, obviously though, that is not going to be that much of an issue. So either way, and you'll see why, as soon as we're able to actually done with every board in Super Mario Party Jamboree, either on Switch 1 or Switch 2, depending on what version of the game you're playing. So, and here comes the forms of the volcano eruption, and suffice to say, there's a bunch of golden Goombas. So, and as a result, if the golden Goombas decides to come into play, they are obviously placed in some spots of this island right there, and then every time whenever you manage able to bypass them, or depending on what characters you're going to be using, likely for example with Mario and Luigi, and I would say Wario as well, they do seem able to actually threaten the forms of golden Goombas quite differently compared to the forms of how it does if you try to select these playable characters from Bowser's minions. As you can tell, Boo never actually stomped onto one of those golden Goombas, so instead they somehow managed able to let him bypass the golden Goomba, and as you can tell, every time whenever you do manage to either defeat the golden Goomba or bypass those golden Goombas entirely, you're able to actually guarantee to get yourselves about 5 coins. So either way though, because that's another ridiculously easy way to grind for some more coins and stuff like that, which you probably get the idea for this point. And good thing we actually got ourselves the payday double dice, so that way I can get myself some even more coins presumably until the next turn. So because of that though, yeah, and luckily though, the golden pipe is accessible in this board, so at the very least that's that. So either way though, don't expect it about the fact you might get stuck onto one of those islands for about a few turns or something like that, just like the forms of how it does it on any other island hopping boards in Mario Party's past. So yeah, you get the idea for that point. So, and suffice to say though, is about the fact I'm pretty sure we've almost at the halfway point in terms of experiencing most of these boards in Super Mario Party Jamboree already, which I know for a fact it goes by a lot quicker than I was expecting. I mean, still, no matter what though, is about the fact that some turns might take a bit of a forever process at that point, which is especially noticeable because of all that Jamboree buddy system. But apart from those side things though, yeah, you get the idea. So, anywho though, and suffice to say though, it's about the fact that, as you can definitely tell, already so far, for our channel anyway, that recently, both Mighty and Ray are already playing through newer Super Mario Bros. DS already, and so far they actually having a lot of fun playing that ROM hack so far. And suffice to say though, it's about the fact that by that time until next week, specifically next Saturday, and the future weekends to come, hopefully though they'll be going back onto newer Super Mario Bros. DS for the majority of the weekends for the likes of uploading schedules, whilst, you know what I'm saying, unlike me, for the sake of the forms of still experiencing Super Mario Party Jamboree is still most likely going to take place in weekdays. So I think this might actually be the only videos I'm going to have to upload for the weekend for this week, so just in case we can able to catch up on any other recording sessions for that matter, because again, the first half of the year to me though just feels a bit all over the place, you know? And it's also reassuring about this too, is about the fact that apparently though, some fans have been upset recently in regards to the forms of how, in fact, you noticed about the fact that in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds trailer, they did show us the forms of our first footage of the forms of Sonic the Werehog is actually going to be in a kart racing game, and as a result though, there's no voice, so as a result, fans are furious about it. So because of that though, yeah, it's a shame honestly, because even then though, I could have able to actually have some potential to able to actually bring in a new voice for Sonic the Werehog, but unfortunately though, that's not the case. Maybe for the PC Steam mod, we're able to actually fix something like this. I mean, truth be told though, is about the fact that despite, well, you know, that particular character is going to be accessible for pre-order bonus after all, so new turn. Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a missed opportunity whenever they did not include the actual voice clips for Sonic the Werehog in mind. So, kind of a shame though, but even then, it's been about I would classify as saying it's been almost 20 years, or should I say, it's been about 17 years since Sonic the Werehog actually has a voice. So, since in, you know, in Sonic Unleashed. So, either way. Alright, so it looks like we're about to be going into the next duel minigame. So, let's see what are we going to be playing next. Stone Eye Bowling. Oh, that's interesting. You have 10 seconds to decide where to roll the ball to take out as many stone eyes as you can. You only have one shot, so as a result, think of like Goomba bowling, except you have one attempt, and obviously if you couldn't tell, it's a duel minigame. So because of that, oh, and keep that in mind though, I recently gone back into using my Switch Pro controller because obviously though, like I stated before, until the next board, I would say the next board after this, what appears to be Rainbow Galleria, I might able to actually go back on using my Joy-Con controller, so just in case about the fact that I'm pretty sure that we are basically almost done showing you guys every single motion control minigames of how this game offers. So as a result, yeah, we pretty much get the idea of the fact that we are basically almost done in terms of the minigame variety when it comes to the majority of the Mario Party mode. Although, what's even a little bit disappointing to me though, is that I don't think it's possible you can able to actually experience every single minigames of the whole entire package, because it's all down to the forms of how the fact that some of the minigames that you can only access to them is by going through some side modes. So, for instance though, I don't think it's possible we can able to actually play through, well, let's just say, coin minigames, specifically based off from Koopa Avalon minigames, and in addition to Bowser Kaboom Squad minigames, and on top of that, Rhythm minigames as well, because they're all basically on side modes throughout the majority of those processes. So because of that though, yeah, it's kind of a shame though, but luckily though, that, as I mentioned this before, that recently though, that the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game has already came out, ever since around 2 days ago, and yes, I did manage able to play for that particular version on my spare own time, and for the most part, it was alright. I mean, it's not the best DLC content, or should I say, it's not the best new edition as far as I'm aware. I mean, generally speaking, that was about the fact that, well, there are some positives I can probably think about. And that's what appears to be, of course, new minigames have been added thanks to the forms of Nintendo Switch 2's capabilities, like the mouse controls, as well as the camera control, and heck, even with the forms of the microphone controls as well. So, logically though, is about the fact that we can able to experience some more variety, which as a result, yes, at that point, we actually got into for a grand total of whopping 132 minigames on this whole entire package in regards to the forms of Super Mario Party Jamboree, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, plus Jamboree TV. Now, as far as whenever I did manage to experience Jamboree TV on my spare own time, the content-wise, it's pretty much in a small quantity, I might say, compared to the forms of how it does on the base game, because in base game, the content is already jam-packed well enough as it stands. But as far as Jamboree TV is concerned though, at the very least though, it does have some interesting stuff here and there, such as for instance though, is about the fact that they obviously did manage to feature two brand new modes that are only exclusive onto Switch 2 Edition, such as Bowser Live and Carnival Coaster. So as a result, however, I will admit it though right away, is that after I somehow experienced those modes on my spare own time, they only lasted for about a couple of minutes. So as a result, yeah, I just wish there was actually more to it than that. And when it comes to the forms of free play, I think there's only one minigame mode you can only access to on Jamboree TV, which appears to be none other than free play, which again, I just wish there was actually more to it. And on top of all that stuff though, there's also the usual Mario Party mode, which is self-explanatory, but this time around though is about the fact that we can only able to actually access to 3 different rule sets, which of almost first of all, you can able to actually experience 4 of those rule sets, but apparently though, if I've double checked on that front, apparently that's not the case, because as a result, there are 3 rule sets we can only select from, and that's of course the usual normal party roles, and in addition to frenzy roles, and tag team roles as well, and that's about it. So because of that though, yeah, it's a shame about the fact that the pro roles is not being added onto that particular mode this time around, so yeah, it's definitely a bit of a missed opportunity there. But regardless of anything else though, what I felt was a little bit odd too, that you can't able to actually just, you know, take a look around on any other islands too, because we are strictly onto not only Mario Party mode, but in addition to free play mode in the minigame bay, and on top of that with the forms of Bowser Live, and especially noticeable with Carnival Coaster. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed, but regardless of such though, the only reason why we still managed to go in the first place is to able to check out some unique Switch 2 features with, you know, mouse controls and camera features and microphone especially. So because of that though, yeah, you can get the idea for that point. So alright, so Peach is once again is going to be the Jamboree buddy again, ever since in Journey Forms have been the second board, so I'm guessing that Monty Mole is going to go towards Peach after all. So anyway, well, on the subject for that matter though is about the fact that as far as what Ray or Mighty for that matter, I would say Ray most likely, that he did mention about the forms of some bunch of announcements they did bring for the most recent Pokemon Presents Direct. And for my final thoughts of the most recent Pokemon Presents, after I look back on it though, it's not as great as I've hoped. I mean, there's some exciting stuff, don't get me wrong, but as a result for that matter though, most of them are just filler, because of the forms of how the fact that they are so obsessed with mobile and Switch releases for the sake of the forms of those, well, again, we'll talk more about that in a moment, because even then, the first thing they did bring up, I suppose that Ray has completely forgot to mention about, that's what appears to be, yes, Pokemon World Championships is going to be returning, and it's going to take place in a different location this time, I can assure you for the sake of time, which appears to be in California at Anaheim, I think is what it says anyway, and it's going to take place in Journey Forms of in August 15th to 17th. So because of that, yeah, Pokemon World Championships 2025 is going to make its appearance in Journey Forms of in next month. So alongside with that, I believe there's also a special themed Pokemon card, which appears to be called Paradise Resort, which does manage to feature a very cool image of the Forms of World Championships 2025 for the likes of Pokemon, and it did say the actual description for it, and it did state this. The retreat cost of each side duck in play, both yours and your opponent's. It's star less, I think it's what it says anyway. I mean, mind you though, I didn't exactly collect that much of Pokemon trading cards or anything else like that, because I still managed to only got, well, one of them, which appears to be Keldeo, but that usually comes with Kyurem versus the Swords of Justice DVD, but that was back in very long time ago. But I've recently did manage to able to give it to a good friend of mine, Stuart, because he's still into the forms of Pokemon even to this day, and he was seriously really looking forward to able to actually experiencing Pokemon Legends CA. I would classify the same for the fact I did tell him that he might suggest able to actually go for the Switch 2 edition, just because, well, obviously though, I do apologize for that particular tongue twist in the end, folks, because I would have liked able to explain something else for that matter, but even then though, still we did somehow messed up on round 2, because again, it's incredibly luck based if you play the actual round with the computer players, as to be expected. Anyway, after that, they've shown us some more footage about the forms of the upcoming Netflix series, which appears to be none other than Pokemon Computerite, I think is what it says anyway, which appears to be is almost like a unique art style, which does manage to feature stop motion animation, and it does look very promising, all things considered. I will definitely check that thing out, and as far as I'm aware, new episodes is going to be up until specifically September 4th, so because of that though, yeah, I'm very curious to check it out. And while on the subject, in regards to the forms of stop motion animations, well, conveniently enough, Peter Lord, who is actually also the part of the forms of those very unique art style creators, specifically when it comes to Artmen. Yes, apparently though, they somehow mentioned about the forms of Pokemon collaboration with Artmen. So as a result, yeah, Peter Lord was there, that he was also created the forms of amazing Artman projects during that time, specifically Wallace and Gromit. So as a result though, yes, there's actually going to be some sort of a series is going to be coming out until specifically in 2027, because I almost first thought it was going to be like a movie, but actually as it turns out it was just a series after all. So because of that, the series is going to be called Pokemon Tales, the misadventures of Surfetched and Pichu, I think it's what it says anyway. So logically though, it's going to be coming out at some point in 2027, the same year as the forms of how it does it for Sonic the Hedgehog 4 movie, and on top of that with the Legend of Zelda, the Legend of Zelda movie as well, and so much more to think about. So, and after that, they've shown us some very cool construction plans for the sake of the forms of the upcoming attraction, which appears to be called Poke Park Kanto, which is obviously trying to able to replicate the inspiration of the forms of Generation 1 region, but in Poke Park form. Because I almost first thought it was going to be like a third entry of the Poke Park series of games, but it turns out it isn't. So because of that though, I'm fine with that, especially because for what I've seen, the actual Pokemon figures in the actual placements of the actual park itself, it does look pretty cute and also very adorable at the same time. So logically though is about the fact that I believe it does also being confirmed that the grand opening is going to be planned in early 2026, because that's going to be another one of those potential celebrations for the 30th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise. So I guess that makes sense to able to actually mention about the forms of 2026 numbered year. So, and as far as I'm aware, the actual specific thing is going to be taking place in Japan. So, similar to the forms of how it does it for the Super Nintendo World in Universal Studios in Japan. So, that was back in 2021. So, I can't even believe it's been about 4 years ago. Well, actually, technically 3 years ago, actually, since when, well, let's just say the Super Nintendo World has firstly opened up in Japan, despite the countless amount of delays because of all the pandemic and all that. And also I just realized we've actually stumbled across into yet another boss battle minigame, but unfortunately though, we're going back into Hot Cross Blocks again. Oh jeez, this is now the third time we're now going to be experiencing this minigame, and believe me, as soon as we're able to actually get into the later boards, it all gets pretty ridiculous very quickly with all this continuous repeats on some of these luck-based minigames. In fact, between this and Gatekeepers, both of which are pretty annoying to deal with, even if you're trying to win those minigames like that, which again, if we get to the single player mode, oh man, you might see nothing yet. So anyway, and also as far as I'm aware, that the ticket sales are planned to begin at some point in late 2025 for that particular Poke Park Kanto. So yeah, everything else will be according to plan. So anyway, and after that, there's going to be more filler, such as for instance though, with more mobile games and all that stuff, such as for instance more information about Pokemon Go. And this time what appears to be more accurately taking place as in Pokemon Go Fest Max finale in 2025. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be like a true finale of that event, but we shall wait and see. And I believe that particular event is going to take place during the Evolves event also in August, except this time it's going to take place between August 23rd all the way up to August 24th. So yeah, that's something, I suppose. And in addition to that, there's also a new Pokemon that's going to be make its debut. That's what appears to be Eternomentus, I think is what it says anyway. It's almost like a hand-shaped Pokemon or something. Makes its global debut, apparently. So yeah, I guess that's something. And on top of that, we also got ourselves some more information about the forms of Pokemon Master EX, which nothing too special on my part. I mean, it's just there for the sake of the filler. And on top of that, more stuff on Pokemon Cafe remakes, which is nothing all that special. But there's also more information about the forms of Pokemon Sleep, which I suppose that both Ray and Mighty have already mentioned about this already, so I don't think I can go for all that again. And of course, Pokemon Unite 4th anniversary, to able to make it playable appearance of not only Latios, but also Latias as well. Because, that was the only Pokemon I honestly still remember, thanks to the forms of the Pokemon anime movies, as far as I'm aware. And I don't know about you, but my god, we spent on this minigame for about almost 3 minutes. Like, you have no idea about the fact that this minigame really overstayed its welcome. I mean, really overstayed. So, and again, if we get onto this mini game for about so many times later, for the later boards and all that. Oh, Jesus Christ. I believe that particular minigame is about to get repetitive after a while. I mean, it's actually quite fine for the first time, but it's just that after a while, it starts to get a lot more repetitive, especially noticeable with all that, you know, luck aspect is actually involved, and in addition to that, though, just anything else in general, really. So, anywho, though, and they also mentioned about the forms of some more Pokemon trading card game stuff, which this time around, though, they managed able to bring in some packs based off from Mega Evolutions. So as a result, it's going to be releasing until Friday the 26th of September. So because of that, though, yeah, if you're curious to check it out, then by all means. So, anyway, and after that, though, another one of those games has now been recently been announced and all that stuff, which is yet another cross-release between both not only Nintendo Switch 1 specifically, but in addition to mobile phones, and that game was Pokemon Friends. And what do I think about it? I'm not interested. I mean, it's more dedicated to the forms of target audience towards kids either way. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is an interesting concept, like it's more accurately like a puzzle kind of mini game, but ultimately though, to me though, it just feels like a missed opportunity for me. I mean, generally speaking, I was about the fact that what I also do realize is that particular game has already came out just recently, and as a matter of fact though, it's about the fact that between both the mobile phone version and the Nintendo Switch 1 version, as far as I'm aware, basically though, it's about the fact that the major differences between the two versions of these two games in particular, or these two versions of the game specifically, that obviously though, the mobile phone version was actually for free, whilst the Switch version is not. So as a result, it's actually going to cost you for about a tenner, more specifically, which I'm just like, nah, I'm not going to buy it. Especially noticeable because considering for the fact I'm not exactly going to go after any other Pokemon games. I only care for some of them anyway, like Pokemon Snap for the Nintendo 64 because of my childhood memory, and on top of all that stuff though with the Pokepark duology of games, and even Pokemon Rumble to some extent, so, but that's just me. But anyway, as you can tell, that we actually come across into Lava Bubbles is now onto one of the islands of the board. So this means that every time whenever you manage able to actually contact with the forms of those Lava Bubbles, what they can do is that actually takes your 3 coins away if you step onto one of those Lava Bubble spaces. So because of that though, definitely need to watch out for those. So, anyway, and it's also, as far as I'm aware, that yes, Pokemon Friends is going to be a digital-only title, which makes it pretty obvious, because even then, though, I got nothing else to add. So, yeah, at the end of the day, Pokemon Friends it's just there. I mean, it's just there for the sake of the forms of entertainment value, but honestly, though, it's just a waste of my time. So, because of that, though, definitely not worth checking out to me, though, unless if you're very, very curious like some people do. So, either way. The next thing they did brought up is, of course, more gameplay footage of the forms of Pokemon Champions also for mobile phones and Nintendo Switch releases. So, and as far as what Ray has already mentioned about this, is that it's going to be releasing until in 2026. So, makes sense, and especially noticeable, it reminds me of so much of able to experiencing Pokemon Stadium 1 as well as Pokemon Stadium 2 for the Nintendo 64, except now with better visuals and all that. So, yeah, got nothing else to add. And of course, the last thing they did mention about, and as of course, you know, Pokemon Legends EA, not only new gameplay footage, specifically for Switch 2 edition, but on top of that, with a special bundle too, with the Nintendo Switch 2 system. So because of that though, yeah, I can totally see why for a fact a lot of players out there, including Pokemon fans out there, are expecting to get the Switch 2 version instead of the Switch 1 version, because you know, the Switch 2 already came out ever since around a month ago. Well, kind of thinking about it, by that time until next week, it will officially gonna be, actually, no way, I think it was more specifically, next month in particular, that the Switch 2 is already gonna be 2 months old. And suffice to say though, also during around that time and during in August, that we might able to actually hear more about the actual financial results between, let's say, with Switch 1 and probably Switch 2 for the first time when it comes to its financial meetings. So, yeah, I'm very curious to know how the results are going for the beginning of the Switch 2's lifespan. So, we shall wait and see. So anyway, the next thing I want to point out as well is that yes, I did manage to able to go back on playing through Mario Kart Tour again, and truth be told though, is about the fact that obviously though, I've recently unlocked, potentially speaking of, the final 2 drivers in terms of the forms of the actual specific new content was being added, which is to be more specifically, not only Mechanic Mario, but in addition to Mechanic Luigi drivers as well. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that luckily though, those 2 drivers in particular are pretty easy to get. Like for instance though, Mario for Mechanic outfit, obviously it's pretty simple. Basically though, you have to complete several of those achievements and all that stuff, and that's all you have to do for that particular event challenges as far as I'm aware, and all in all, it's actually pretty easy. And the Luigi Mechanic one is actually really easy too, despite the fact you have to go for a lot of grinding for those rubies, which thankfully I've actually got enough rubies, so that way I can able to actually access to, well, Luigi as in a Mechanic outfit. So, yeah, you get the idea of what I was expecting. So, anyway, in terms of these special items they both have, I would say that Mechanic Mario does have triple bananas, and meanwhile for Luigi, he does have a hammer item. So, yeah, I guess as far as I can usually say about that. Alongside with that, I also got myself my glorious variants of Tiny Titan cards, which is to be more specifically, both of them are also very easy to get, although I was expecting to try to get myself the original Tiny Titan card, which is all colored red and everything, but ultimately though, I didn't go after that, mainly because, well, I've already got 2 variants of that particular cards worth noting for. So, before we get into more details about other stuff worth noting for, as you can definitely tell, as what Boo did somehow got, he actually got himself a board exclusive item, which appears to be the Tide Shell. Basically though, what this allows you to do is that you can able to actually activate the Tide or deactivate the Tide, depending on what the actual situation was all about. So as a result, yeah, you can able to actually use that on specific strategy wise. So as a result, yeah, because there's also another method to able to actually cause the Tide to appear. That's of course if you land on the happening space, which I get the feeling that I might able to actually land on one of those event spaces, which yes, I did. So as a result, yeah, we have to go in a loop around for quite a bit on that particular island for the time being. So yeah, it's a little bit of annoying though, which I can totally see why that this board to me though is my least favorite. I mean, don't get me wrong though, I love the aesthetics, but it's just that the main mechanic of the board is that I'm not overly keen on. But thankfully though, until once that particular board is done, that we can able to actually dive into, potentially speaking of, without a doubt is my favorite board in the entire game, which is of course Rainbow Galleria. But then again though, that particular discussion can wait for presumably speaking of until on Tuesday, specifically Tuesday the 29th of July, I think is what it says on the actual calendar front. So alright, defuse or lose. Since that the Boo has almost come towards the Boo spot, I think I might have no choice but able to try to lose this minigame on purpose. So that way I can able to actually stop Boo to try to steal my star, because that's my only strategy I can probably think about it. I know it's a bit risky, but regardless of such though, I absolutely have no choice but to do it. So anyway, so yeah, for my final thoughts of the most recent Pokemon Presents Direct though, like I said before, it's alright. I mean, it's not the best Pokemon Presents in the world. I mean, I really wish that they were able to actually bring in the majority of the classic Pokemon games from the Game Boy era onto the forms of the NSO services, but apparently it doesn't still, which no matter what though, some Pokemon fans seems to complain about the forms of how the fact that they are missing. They know that the older games are better due to forms of well-detailed sprites and everything, and on top of that with nostalgia factor, which as a result that will be the case mind you, and on top of all that stuff though, well, it's hard for me to explain though, because generally speaking I was about the fact that we still haven't got a clue of when does Pokemon Colosseum or Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness will be coming onto the Switch 2 online expansion pack or anything else like that. So thankfully though, if I was going to get those games a shot, on my spare own time in the near distant future. Thankfully though, I don't have to pay the ridiculous amount of money to get ourselves the full physical copy of specifically Pokemon XD or XD Gale of Darkness, because obviously though, that game nowadays is so disgustingly expensive, much like any other GameCube games out there, specifically Mario Superstar Baseball, and in addition to Mario Party 7, and same applies to the forms of, well, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, the original GameCube version, and much more really, depending on what condition you go after, so... But I'm still very lucky enough to able to still got myself, not only Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door within a cheaper price, like specifically 50 quid, and on top of all that stuff, though, say applies with Mario Party 7 back in the day, because obviously though I did manage to able to, conveniently enough, when I was younger, I'm very pleased that I somehow won the betting system for the eBay, so... Yeah, that's pretty fantastic back then, which that was like the good, best memories I can probably think about. In terms of the forms of actually got something for once for eBay. So anyway, oh, we actually got ourselves a hidden block, which I've actually noticed until now. So yeah, pretty cool. So anyway, in regards to the forms of Super Mario Party Jamboree, Nintendo Switch 2 edition has already came out ever since around a couple of days ago, or specifically 2 days ago I should say. Basically though, it's about the fact that I do realize once you start the actual version of the game up, I do like the fact that they're actually going to a very similar transition as the forms of not only Sonic X Shadow Generations, but in addition to Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically though, it actually sends you into a menu selection screen, and as a result, you actually have a choice between 3 different modes, or 3 different games you can able to actually interact with, such as, of course, Super Mario Party Jamboree, the Switch 1 version, where you can able to experience the exact same game again, but without any some sort of improvements at all. And in addition to that, there's also 2 yellow pipes which are only accessed by with the Switch 2 edition, which is of course Jamboree TV and Game Share mode. So as a result, for the sake of Jamboree TV, they somehow mentioned about 4 different aspects such as camera play and microphone and mouse controls, and of course new rules. So as a result, yeah, it seems kind of weird about the fact that new rules is actually going to be on a separate mode for the sake of Jamboree TV instead of comes with the forms of, well, the regular Super Mario Party game, or Super Mario Party Jamboree game I should say. And as far as I'm aware, that when it comes to the forms of those specific rules descriptions for that particular stuff's worth noting for, that we've already mentioned about the forms of the frenzy rules for quite a few times. But keep that in mind though, is about the fact that there are a couple of things I did not know. For the sake of the forms of the tag team roles, as far as I'm aware, there are 4 different aspects I completely forgot to notice. Or technically 3, mind you, because we already know for the fact that one of those new items is going to be in it, which is of course Together Dice, which you can able to call your teammate over to use this item together. So then that way you can able to actually traverse through individual spaces together. So yeah, I guess it's that. But there are 3 other aspects I did not know until now, which appears to be, well, for instance though, teams can usually share items, but they are still limited as in 3 items, because I almost first thought they're trying to bring back the concept from the likes of not only Mario Party 5, but in addition to Mario Party 6, and also Mario Party 7, and in addition to, I would say, Mario Party 8 as well, and I would say DS as well, if I could recall. They're trying to bring back, you can able to actually carry up to 5 items for that particular team, but apparently it doesn't. So because of that though, it looks like for the fact that no matter what though, they still have to force to use 3 items instead of 5, which I've almost first thought about it, but even then, yeah. And there's also a new space that's going to be introduced in that particular tag team rules, which appears to be the rally space, where basically though, the rally space, if you land on that space, you'll warp your teammate over to you and gain 5 coins. So as a result, I think that's what this space can do. Yeah, we'll try to show more about that if we did manage to show off the majority of the Switch 1 content first. So, yeah, keep that in mind. So, and finally, most notably though, I think that's actually going to be the only rules in Super Mario Party Jamboree that Jamboree buddies will not appear on that particular tag team rules. So that was the only mode that the Jamboree buddies will be absent. So because of that, unlike the forms of, let's say, the regular party rules, and in addition to pro rules, and of course frenzy rules, that Jamboree buddies will appear. So yeah, tag team rules on the other hand, just completely absent the actual Jamboree buddy system. I'm guessing it's probably because no matter what though, it's now been taken over thanks to the forms of the special item, which is of course Together Dice. So yeah, that's definitely weird, especially considering of all that particular stuff worth noting for that some players complain about the Jamboree buddy system because of all that overpowered it can be sometimes. So even then though, yeah, it seems kind of weird on any other circumstances. So anyway though, there's also reassuring about this too, is about the fact that recently though, that when it comes to the forms of any other stuff I'd like to point things out, like for instance though, Borderlands 4 is going to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2 until specifically the 3rd of October in 2025. But here's the catch to this though, I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be like a full game into one cartridge, or if not, they're going to be bringing back the stupid concept out of them all, and that's of course the game key cards. And I was like, oh boy, here we go again. So, because apparently though, that Borderlands 4 boss confirms about the fact that there will be a download even for physical copies on Switch 2, which will most likely run at 30 frames per second with some dips. So yeah, that's not a good sign, especially because no matter what though, it's about the fact that I have no idea why they somehow becomes over obsessive with all that game key card format when it comes to the majority of the third-party supportive games. I'm still really expecting it will not be affected on not only potentially Dragon Ball Sparking Zero if that's happening, and on top of that with Final Fantasy VII Remake integrate, because if it's not a game key card, I will definitely go ahead and buy it, whilst if it does, I might have to unfortunately skip that out. So, but either way, we shall wait and see. So anyway, and there's also another thing I'd like to point out, is that we actually got ourselves a DVD release date has been confirmed for specifically Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, specifically the UK version, and as far as I'm aware, the DVD and Blu-ray version of that particular film is going to be releasing until the 13th of October in 2025, once again on Monday. So that's pretty cool and everything, except the fact that that's going to be out until after 2 days after my birthday. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because I was first thought that'll be my wish list after all. But yeah, that was very odd to able to actually try to release that right after my special day coming up. Well, it's hard for me to explain, but even then, yeah, that was as far as I can usually try to describe about anything else potentially. So anywho though, so, and there's also another thing else I'd like to point out as well, is about the fact that I believe that no matter what though, with that particular new Avatar film is going to be on its way, to be more specifically Fire and Ash, as far as what I do realize about something is that the actual runtime of the actual film is going to be the exact same runtime as the forms of how it does it on the second film, which is of course The Way of Water, since in 2022. So no matter what though, it's going to be on 3 hours and 12 minutes, which is roughly, you know, the exact same time length as the forms of, you know, The Way of Water. So yeah, it's very interesting. They did manage to able to bring in the exactly the same time length of the actual film's release, as far as I'm aware. And unlike the forms of how it does on the first film, either way, that obviously though, it only goes for about 2 hours and 42 minutes back in 2009. So yeah, that's an interesting comparison between the forms of, well, most of these Avatar films as far as this is considering for. So, but yeah, I would have liked able to explain something else for that matter though, but honestly guys, that's as far as I can try to describe it by. I mean, sure, maybe we shall wait and see what happens and join at some point on next week for the time, for the sake of the films, just to see that we might able to actually finally get a chance to hear more about. More release dates to come for the majority of the forms of not only Nintendo Switch 2 things, but also the last bunch of the forms of Switch 1 stuff as well. But even then, my hopes will be pretty much a 50-50 for the sake of time, for maybe we'll able to hear more about, supposedly for that particular Nintendo Direct will be coming up, hopefully though. But yeah, that's as far as I can really think about it, I guess. So, and yeah, as you probably already expect, for the fact that no matter what though, is about the fact that at that point in time, since I've now managed able to actually unlock, Mechanic Mario and Mechanic Luigi, as you can probably tell, in Mario Kart Tour, I have no choice but to able to take a break on that game for a long time, until God knows if the actual service of the game will be closing down in the near distant future or anything else like that. I mean, chances are though is about the fact that, again, every time whenever I go back onto Mario Kart Tour after playing through not only Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but also with Mario Kart World recently at the time, obviously though, yet again, I keep on getting myself some bad RMGs every once in a while with all that, not only bad rubber banding, and on top of all that stuff though, too much chaotic item moments here and there, which I'm just like, yeah, bad controls and all that stuff on top of all that stuff as well. It's just, well, here's the thing though, because I think that might actually be the only time I'm actually going to be going into every single cups in for that particular summer tour in 2025. No! Ah, Monty Mole, you in my way! Ah, dang you. Just dang you. That little pesky little... Fine, we'll let Shy Guy win on that one. I mean, I was doing quite well, but then out of nowhere, that Monty Mole was in my way, and it's also reassuring I can't really see what the heck I was doing for that particular movement, so... Well, because unlike the previous 2 attempts on the previous 2 boards, at the very least I did somehow win no problem, but it's gonna be one of those moments where sometimes computer players always has a vendetta against you, so yeah, I can totally see why that's the case, so yeah, there goes my star. I could have won on that particular previous minigame, but actually gonna think about it, I might actually have a payback until when it gets to my turn, as long as if I don't land on that Bowser space, if the bonus stars will come into play, if it's all randomized and everything, so... But either way, so... Yeah, I guess there's nothing else I can really say about this board personally. I mean, chances are though is about the fact that if you pretty much like it, then by all means, you can able to enjoy this board a lot. But it's just that I don't usually play this board that often, just because of all that. Well, you know what I'm saying, for the fact that if the tides come in, and then obviously though, that there's nothing else you can really do, aside from the fact that you're able to actually try to go after, not only the pipe, but in addition to a golden pipe eventually, and of course, most notably, the warp block as well. So that way, that was the only options for you, in terms of trying to go into any other islands once the tides come in, so... Anyway, so it's time to use my double dice, so just in case I can able to meet up with Boo to potentially try to steal a star back. So, 14, not bad. And yeah, as you probably already expect, for the fact that the space sizes are now going back into its normal size, unlike the forms of Roll and Raceway, they are huge as it stands, so... Oh yeah, and speaking of the forms of single player mode, I don't suppose if you noticed, but in the single player mode called Party Planner Trek, I believe you can only experience 5 boards instead of all 7, which we'll talk more about that if we dive onto 2 retro boards, so, but that's not going to be until specifically until 2 weeks time, mind you, because like I said before, this Let's Play is going to be much more huge in comparison to any other Mario Party games up to that point, especially now with that, you know, the Switch 2 content does now already exist, so logically though is about the fact that, like I said before, that I might as well say this again anyway, that I will definitely try to show off every content of how this game actually has to offer, so, because unlike something related to Maxi 10 back then, that he only shows 1 board and that's it, no side content whatsoever, and it was just like, that's just pure lazy, so, anywho though, And aside from all that stuff though, it's about the fact that there's nothing else I can talk about. Although, thankfully though, for my practice runs of the majority of the modes in Jamboree TV, it is definitely possible you can able to actually experience every mode with computer players. So as a result, unlike the forms of how it does it on Mario Party Island Tour, where basically though that the only way you can able to experience Shy Guy's Shuffle City is that you need 3 or 4 people in order to able to actually access that board. So yeah, that's something's worth noting for. So oh yeah, that's another one of those event spaces right there, as far as Shy Guy did participate. If you dare pick the Goomba, you lose coins. So as a result, you know, think of like the Forms of Shell game, except you can able to actually pick one of those items that's on the chest. Alright, another new minigame, Trampoline. Okay, I'm very curious to know what this is about. Avoid the horned ant troopers, as in Super Mario 3D World enemies, as you bounce continuously. If you land on one, you're out. So, now I believe this minigame also does have the endless version of that particular minigame, which, yeah, we'll show off the endless versions of some minigames during the forms of in free play, once we've gone through the forms of every single mode of the entire game, including the Jamboree TV mode at some point. So, that was awfully close. In fact, Shy Guy just wins again. Jeez, I definitely need to back up for trying to win more of those minigames more often until when the minigame bonus will come in. I mean, true enough though is about the fact that, like I stated before, the bonus stars will get shuffled every once in a while depending on what board you go into, so...
New turn.
Alright, turn 11, here we go.